10. Hello, I'm Jeremy Allaire, and this is the Money Movement, a show where we explore the issues and ideas in this brave new world of digital currency and blockchains. A lot is going on in crypto, in digital currencies and blockchains, just an unbelievable amount of market activity, just continued surging growth in dollar digital currencies like USDC. It's growing from 4 billion to nearly 6.3 billion today. DeFi growth has been enormous, not just in the value of DeFi tokens, but in the amount of capital that's coming into them. And we're really starting to see a lot of different market participants and sectors really starting to pay attention here. And so this week, I'm super excited to be joined with Stani Kulechov from Aave. And we're going to have a great conversation on DeFi in 2021. And I'm sure we're going to cover a lot of really cool topics. Great to see you, Stani. You're muted.
Hi, Jeremy. Do you hear me?
Yeah, now I do.
Okay, there's some connection issues on my side. Hope it gets better. But yeah, thanks for having me here in the show.
Yeah, totally. Well, I know we were in the midst of a conversation last night on Clubhouse, so we'll just keep the conversation going. But as I was saying before the show, I think I want to start with. I always love to start a little bit with people's personal journey, and I know your journey starts in, obviously you have your whole life behind you, but in terms of crypto, being really early in decentralized finance, really one of the first creators really in DeFi. And I'd kind of love to hear, first just what was the aha moment that helped you get inspired to work on DeFi? What was it? The Ethereum white paper? Was it something after that? Where did that start? And then maybe a little bit of ETHLend's history, and then obviously we'll get into Aave in a little bit.
Okay, so sorry, Jeremy. I found the issue. I actually had the the headphones didn't work. That's
okay. All right.
So yeah, definitely. So I didn't hear everything, but I guess
a little bit of how you got into your earliest inspiration getting into DeFi. You were really early, obviously, in the Ethereum community, and just want to hear a little bit of that, kind of what inspired you to start building in the space.
Awesome, yeah. So I guess pretty much I've been always a bit involved in finance. So I started to code very early. I think I was 13 years old when I started to code PHP, and at 15 I got excited about Ruby on Rails.
Never coded with Cold Fusion.
I was actually I tried to do something. I was too young. I think I was 9 years old. So
okay.
My brother was more into that.
That's great.
And I think I was building more of financial applications when I was 18, and practically I run a lot of into kind of regulation, kind of topics in terms of regulation. And I went to study law. And because I really wanted to understand, how you can build financial applications and how to deal with regulation. And at some point, end of my kind of studies, I started to do research on contracts, so how to make more efficient agreements. And one of the things I actually stumbled upon was Ethereum and smart contracts. And there was a interesting component there that you basically can create code that doesn't change, in the sense that you can have it as an immutable code or community governance code. And that for me was kind of a moment when I realized that actually you could create all kinds of financial applications,
Yeah.
and without the need of trust. And one of the things we started to build as a proof of concept was pretty much lending and borrowing, and this was 4.5 years ago.
Right. It's super cool. I mean, I think I actually had a background in political science, and became a technologist, and have always been interested, it sounds like you, in this sort of intersection of sort of what governance is in the world at large, and then its intersection with open platforms and technology. And yeah, I mean, I think, back in 2013, when the first kind of wave of companies, were starting, like, as a technologist, what was interesting was not just like there's this digital currency, like it almost seemed like obvious, like, yeah, of course we're going to have digital currency to work everywhere, but it's this programmable money idea that was so powerful, and that can really radically change the world, and so that's why I got into it too. And like the building blocks just took a while to get in place. So I know if you were building ETHLend back 4.5 years ago, right, things were pretty raw. Yeah. So obviously, you've taken another attempt at it here with Aave, which is obviously achieving enormous success now. So obviously, congratulations. But maybe just a little bit of the origin of Aave.
Yeah, I guess it was like at some point, I mean, we started with ETHLend and created kind of like first market for lending and borrowing on chain. And it was pretty much bilateral order matching, in the sense that we had users that wanted to lend out assets, and other ones who wanted to practically borrow those assets against the collateral. And that was time when we didn't have actually that much of market capitalization in various assets that were used as collateral. So we decided not to go to a pooled kind of like collateralization model. And this was the time where actually stablecoins weren't existing in DeFi. So practically the borrowings were Ethereum or USD-backed Ethereum, which was kind of like a very tricky. So you can imagine the use case was not just narrow with the DeFi users back then, but also like what you could do with your borrowings.
Yeah.
And I think it was 2018 when the market conditions were a bit different, in the sense that there was a bear market that started quite heavily. And 2018, we kept continuing like building in different iterations, but we realized that kind of like ETHLend was a bit of a meme, in the sense that it's Ethereum lending, and we created the name, but we understood that we're creating a lot of more serious infrastructure, and we wanted to rebrand something that's more kind of like general, but has a very big community vibe. So we always been in the sense that we wanted to build kind of like, we build tech, but we also want to build a lot of culture, because end of the day, the tech and the finance is going to be kind of like be connected with everything that will exist in the on-chain ecosystem. And then I think it was last year, 2020, January, we practically launched the Aave protocol. And since then, pretty much from zero, we have grown into a protocol that holds 5 billion worth of value, which is incredibly unbelievable for me and the whole team.
Yeah, it's truly incredible. So I think for folks that have been in DeFi, and some of the audience on Money Movement definitely are active market participants, have a pretty solid understanding. But I think one of the cool things that's happening right now, like as we speak, is like this is getting on the radar of like so many more people. And so there's a lot of people who are just like really trying to understand, like, what is this? What are the implications of this? I just did a media interview this morning, and it was all about this. And it was from like a really mainstream, like kind of like payments and banking kind of place. And it was kind of like, how do you translate this for people in TradFi or traditional finance and or the layperson, and so like maybe just like from your perspective, kind of really breaking it down into like basic building blocks. What is DeFi for borrowing and lending, right? And how does that compare to, I want to like lend to a bank and get paid something, or I want to borrow from a bank. Like just fundamentals, like kind of like DeFi 101 for people.
Yeah, I guess probably one of the most interesting part is related to DeFi kind of like properties is the fact that the users has the opportunity to choose not to give custody. So as a DeFi user, and for me, DeFi is also Bitcoin, it's Ethereum, it's whatever is being built on Ethereum, which has decentralized governance.
Yeah.
And there you can actually choose that. Actually, I don't need. I can keep my custody of my funds, and I can choose what I will participate in a permissionless fashion, or then I can actually choose a custodian if I actually want to do that. And DeFi kind of like allows this permissionless access to pretty much to choose whatever you want to participate in this ecosystem. And by ecosystem, we're talking about whatever is built on Ethereum that you can interact with. And compared to, for example, traditional finance, usually you basically, you're a customer with a bank, you're pretty much using their services, and to change your like service providers from one bank to another, and that's a big hurdle. And also like being able to keep your accounts in one place, your funds in one account, and participating in something other service providers offerings, it's not very like how to say, there isn't much of communication and interoperability in place. And what DeFi actually does, it just takes and makes all of this kind of like infrastructure to communicate with each other. So practically, not just that you can practically select whatever you want to use, but there's also developers. There's thousands of developers practically working every day in open source fashion to contribute and create new products and services that actually remove inefficiencies.
Yeah.
I think those are like the main thing. There's of course other things related to what makes DeFi awesome, but
yeah.
I guess from traditional finance perspective, that's the kind of like interesting part.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of times, people they're looking for analogies to like how is this going to be different or better. A lot of times there's this concept of sort of the internet sort of can make things 10x better or 100x better or whatever it is. And I think when one starts to use DeFi, you intuitively, I think people grasp all of those things that you've described, just like how radically empowering that is and efficient. A lot of times people don't even realize, right, that like we have, decentralized communications, we have decentralized information sharing, we have decentralized, messaging. We have decentralized video, there's semantics, right? Because in a purist sense, like decentralized would be everyone's running a peer on a peer-to-peer network, but like we have, essentially permissionless protocols that are at a minimum fully distributed that people can connect to, and that's like the internet. And so it's like, well, just think about what the internet's done for how we can share information and data and communicate and connect. It's these open networks, permissionless protocols, mostly developed under open source efforts and open intellectual property. And I kind of call that like the inherent DNA of the internet. It's sort of a lot of the internet was born that way, and it's just taking all those same things that we take for granted and saying, well, that's what's going to happen with money. I think one of the things, and I talk a lot about like the future of markets, the future of capital markets. Effectively, like Aave is a capital market. It's a form of capital market around borrow and lend. And, one of the other things that the internet seems to do really, really well is establish long tail markets, effectively enabling every level of participant in the world to participate in a market, whether that is as a creator, a seller, a musician, all these incredible platform marketplaces. Sharing economy is like another dimension of that as well. But like basically like these long tail markets, and I like to think of crypto and DeFi as enabling like long tail capital markets. And I'm curious what you think about the future. We have that with like DEXs. They're like long tail capital markets. Like anyone can go, create a market. But when you think about things like the core behavior of borrowing and lending, there's obviously potentially so many different ways that could be sliced and diced and surfaced to people who need to borrow or who need to lend. Do you envision, Aave and the broader space, like continuing to really like diversify out the richness of how that can work so that it can service not just people who are, say, pledging crypto to borrow on margin to trade, but like a more regular everyday kinds of borrow and lending?
Yeah. So one of the like really coolest thing that is happening with the Aave protocol is that exactly it's because it creates this kind of like it's running on this like internet of finance. So pretty much like if you have an internet connection, you're pretty much connected into the system in the same kind of like a mindset. So anyone can actually get the same yields what the protocol provides. So it kind of like democratizes many things. So for example, I'm here in London now. I get the same access to the same yield as someone else will get from, let's say, Brazil, Hong Kong, Singapore, and so forth. So kind of like that's the kind of main element, that you actually have this like global market, and pretty much when you deposit to Aave, let's say USDC, you get back so-called A tokens, so AUSDC. That AUSDC algorithmically goes in your balance, and that makes it kind of like a USD denominated global savings account in DeFi in one way.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very much something that empowers in many places, because you don't have in all regions access to USD denominated practically income, and that has automated treasury management.
Yeah, it's incredible. The concept, just that you told someone like you have like a savings account, and you can take that savings account and just like give it to someone, not give it to them, you can sell it to them, but you could actually give it to them if you wanted to give it to them as well. And it's just, and it continues to be this yield generating savings account. You can pass it around just like you pass around an MP3 file and whatever. And people are like, what? Like that doesn't sound possible.
And what's cool about this, Jeremy, is that like when we look at like traditional US dollar as a kind of like a payment instrument. So US dollar, every time you pay with it, practically whoever receives it, the value of the USD practically decreases because of the inflation. And here you have like practically a payments currency increasing in balance wherever you are sending it, and it's practically backed by USDC. So it's very interesting. Like Aave, we don't have any kind of like we don't put efforts to make it as a payment currency, but we're happy to see that this kind of like algorithmic balance increases can work in even USDC level or anywhere, because it's a nice way to credit value to the holders.
No, it's brilliant. It'll be fascinating to see whether these yield generating dollar tokens become more common for people transacting with them. Just like I don't want that deflationary or that inflationary thing that's going down in value. I only want to accept AUSDC or CUSDC or whatever. It's pretty amazing. I think like one of the big things I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on is, today, right? People are pledging, collateral to borrow, right? And they're pledging, hard collateral, right? Because it's liquid collateral, and it's liquid collateral in the crypto markets, whether it's like, like ETH, wrapped Bitcoin, USDC, DAI, and so on, right? So these are in some ways like the hardest assets that there are, because they're these digital bearer instruments, and you can, that's why people are comfortable with this in many ways, right? It's not some fuzzy thing where there's like this legal agreement and you don't really know what's going to happen. But like clearly, a lot of this becomes like really interesting when the real world becomes tokenized. And when these protocols can surface value for people against the real world. I wonder how we get there. I mean, we were talking last night about tokenized equities, and like Sam is like, he's doing it, and there are gonna be a lot of other people that do it too. And I think there are gonna be people in the US, and so that'll be a view into that. And, I know of just from our own work, like, tokenized fund products that are quite significant in scale that will go on chain, and people will be able to, the people who could never access like ETFs or certain types of funds, like will be able to access those, with just a crypto wallet anywhere in the world. It's really powerful. But what about like other things? I think part of the idea of tokenization is that, the value of so many other things in the world can be represented on chain, and then people can not just exchange it, but that they can actually borrow against it or lend to those that want it. How do you think that evolves?
Yeah, so I guess like what we see now quite a lot is practically tokenizations on something that is fungible. For example, like US dollars are a pretty good thing that has happened recently in terms of like tokenization, and that's one of the most used collaterals even in Aave. And but there's like a lot of value related to things that are less fungible, actually non-fungible properties. There's value in creator economy. There's everywhere value, and I think like what like we definitely will see this value transform at some point and have this kind of like a cryptographic representation. But I guess like for example, what Circle has done pretty well is that you guys have taken like one particular thing and tokenizing it very well. And when we're looking like, let's say, tokenization of real value, real estate and whatnot, we try to kind of like solve the issue too widely. So I guess like the solution will be that we try to tokenize something very locally, whether it's timber, whether it's commodities or real estate, and try not to kind of achieve it in a global scale yet, and try to move like step by step in that sense. But I think that value is coming. And I guess one of the coolest thing I'm been now following quite a lot is practically the labor market on chain. So things like, for example, Gitcoin, that you can actually, you actually don't need stable coins to, or let's say fiat currency to get to stable coins and onboard. But you could actually, you could work and get stable coins, for example. And this kind of new onboarding mechanism, I think it's very valuable. But I guess like in terms of like tokenization, that's something that's probably will progress quite a lot now during this year. But what it comes like one of the things what's important about DeFi is that we get the liquidity back into traditional finance. So currently we have liquidity kind of like a crunch that we need more liquidity into DeFi, but at some point we need to get that liquidity back into where basically people are doing also business. That's where in Aave we have this credit delegation mechanism where you can whitelist some of the borrowers, for example, might be institutions or whatnot, might be from traditional finance, and the depositors could delegate their credit lines. So when they deposit to Aave, they earn, but they might not exercise the credit line. So they delegate to them, and they are practically financing their businesses and businesses in traditional finance and consumers. So end of the day, like we might end up in a situation that where someone buys a house or a car, that liquidity comes from DeFi.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm excited about. Is sort of delegating out those market functions into DeFi protocols themselves, creating those kind of meta structures to make that possible. It's interesting. I mean, I think with USDC, like there is this kind of assurance layer. There's a governance layer. People understand like Circle is bound by like law, and where there's regulators making sure like we don't run off with reserves or that we maintain the full reserves, and so that certainly provides trust. But yeah, something like a house or a car, or I like to think about if there become more seamless ways to like tokenize everyday objects like in a community. tokenize, the snowblower. I live where there's a lot of snow, but like someone is a snowblower, and it can be a community object, and you have
good, basically.
Yeah, public good, and you can transact on it. And I'm not sure if you've looked at our Zora. Yeah, I mean, it's a really powerful concept, and it sort of fuses real world objects with tokenization as non-fungible tokens that ownership can pass between people, and then they're sort of redeemable. And what our Zora is doing is they're creating the assurance market so that market participants know, like sort of like with eBay in the early days, like, how do I know, like, I'm going to get my Beanie Babies? How do I know you're not a fraudster, right? So the assurance layer is really, really key. Moving assurance models, risk and reputation models on chain as well can be very, very significant to this kind of thing.
And our Zora is pretty fascinating, because I mean, it's like, I kind of see it, as something like you have that today, like Etsy. So creators can actually do different kinds of physical object, and pretty much it's tokenized, so you have value, and you can tokenize before the object even practically exists in theory.
Yeah, they're doing that on our Zora. Like, there's people are saying, like, I'm here's the design for something I want to make. It's a little bit of a, what was the crowdfunding site that people would make things for? It still exists. I forget what it's called.
Kickstarter, right?
Kickstarter, right? Yeah. So there's a little bit of that, which is like, I'm going to make these, like, this limited edition, like, really cool designer jeans. I'm going to figure out how to make them, and I'm going to make 20 of them, and you can buy, their NFTs, and you can basically pay for them, and you'll get them, and it's creating a scarcity, desirable object that then is tradable on chain as well.
What's the cool part? Like, this allows actually more people to create things and less things. So you don't need to create, let's say, hundreds of thousands of t-shirts that are looking the same. You can create just less, and people want that. It creates more brands and more kind of like creators as well. Like, it's really empowering.
Yeah. And this is a little bit of what I was getting to earlier, which is like, the internet's really great at long tail markets. And if we can actually move the marketplace and the role of the marketplace on chain, and we can bring, forms of identity and reputation and that assurance layer that, used to require, like, big intermediaries like eBay or Amazon or Alibaba, and you can have that be on chain. And you have, like, labor markets tokenized so that, you have this tokenization of work, and all that can happen through these efficient protocols. It's like this new substrate for organizing labor output, economic coordination, and actually making things for people that are useful and creating value, right?
And cool part about that is, kind of like what I will see, probably we already see it, that there's developers working in multiple protocols, and collaborating quite a lot. So you kind of actually, like, with open source and with this, like, ownership economy, you actually can choose who you work with and what you work upon. And I think that's something that, if it starts to scale, it might be quite interesting. Like,
yeah. Well, that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about too. Was, you're community governed. You have a governance token. So, again, just for the people who are new to this, right? Aave protocol, it's not a company. It's actually just this machine that exists on the internet. That's immutable. It's just this machine that provides this function as a public good to the world. It has some intrinsic economics, and it also coordinates work and coordinates decisions through the governance token. How is that working, like, today in practice, just in terms of coordinating work, coordinating decisions, improving things like that?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because, like, it's something that we haven't been used to, because like Aave has been known like that we have very high rate of innovation, and we can practically develop and ship very secure code and with a lot of innovation. And now kind of like with the governance and everything, it's completely different, because if you want to build something, or someone proposes in the community, it has to go to this layer of governance where everyone can actually look at the idea, brainstorm, get involved. And I think at first it was a bit of like it felt a bit burdensome, but as people started to get more involved, actually I understood in that particular moment that the probably the decentralized governance is one of the best kind of like a mechanisms of the on-chain ecosystem, and what smart contracts are providing. And practically anyone actually could go and make a proposal to the DAO that, hey, I want to build something cool, or I have a cool idea, and probably will cost like this amount of funds. Can I get a grant? And some of the ideas are absolutely amazing. Like we do a lot of engineering, like economical, technical implementations, but the amount of people there are in the community with different ideas, it's just it's amazing actually. And I think like we're now in the state where we actually are kind of like trying to organize a bit more the work, so that the governance is more inclusive, that anyone can come and just start to ask grants, whatever they want to build. So it's a process that takes a lot of time, because like in Aave, the building the community took us roughly like over 40 years or so. So all of the kind of like a success in community wise and branding, it's actually something that's compounded over years. And the same thing will be with the governance. I think the Aave governance will look good in 5 to 10 years from now. And then it will be kind of like very interesting to see like how it will function. And one interesting thing I want to add to here is that we recently launched the version 2 of the governance, which allows not only delegating voting power, but delegating actual proposition power. And we see like proposition power in a way that whenever you want to make a proposal on chain, you have to put it on chain. And if there is positive outcome of the vote, that code will be executed on chain. So practically proposition power is a way of Aave token holders to actually choose the code makers, the lawmakers, or whatever is the terminology. And then delegated voting power is how you could actually choose the protocol politicians, unless you want to keep those powers to yourself. And this kind of like creates actually interesting element, because the code makers are competing of creating good proposals. And when we look at, let's say, how governments work, you have a government that makes the proposals and you either vote yes or no, but now you have an element of competing kind of like proposals that are going on chain. And that's like a very fascinating part. And because the strategies, like you can have strategies in the governance, it means that we can create a new market where not just Aave token has voting power, but let's say if there's assets such as Uniswap, liquidity shares as a collateral, same from Sushi and Balancer, you can basically give voting power to Uni, you can give voting power to BAL, Sushi tokens, and make more inclusive governance. And I think that's the next step in DeFi, that everything becomes a bit more a mesh. Everyone works together in multiple things, and also kind of like govern commonly all of the like main protocols.
Yeah, it is, I think, the greatest laboratory in the world for for the future of coordination and economic coordination and work coordination. It's just so exciting from that perspective. Just building on that and tying back to some of the other things we talked about, I'm really excited about experimentation in, these new types of I call them corporate forms, but basically like we had joint stock corporations, and now we have DAOs, is a really genuine new form of kind of corporate organization. But effectively, we're for the first time, we have a substrate that's global, that allows for the creation of organizations where anyone in the world can participate economically, anyone can participate in various forms of stakeholding, and where you have the ability to structure really innovative forms of decision making. And when you think about what a corporation is, right, it's a token that has certain privileges. It's a treasury that token basically governs what happens with that treasury. And then it's this nexus of contracts, maybe, between, there are entities and individuals that are interacting with that entity. And there's such this enormous edifice of legal, political, economic infrastructure to kind of support that. And now we're radically simplifying it, and in many ways. And I think one of the things I'm most excited about is to see what kinds of new corporate forms are created. I think one of the biggest questions for our industry is, how will governments treat these things? When it's sort of in a very free market way, right? I've created this thing. There's potentially thousands of people involved in it, and it's creating things. It's creating value. Anyone's interacting with it. Like, what is that? Can you tax that thing? Like, are the individuals subject to their local tax laws? Like, what the heck is it? So, do you think, given your background, you were studying law and contracts before this, do you think this is like going to require fundamental rethinking of corporate law? Basically, is it going to become, like internet law is like a different kind of law? Like what do you see happening there? I think about this a lot, looking at projects like Claros, open law, things that are trying to figure out how to intermediate some of that. But like at the end of the day, right, we live in these places that have armies and have taxes, and like we have to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is a physical world, and I guess I've been thinking this quite a lot. So I spent all my time thinking everything related to on-chain stuff. But there's I think there's two paths. Like one path, we just try to figure out like how contractually what's happening here, which we could kind of like see that when people come together and they choose to use software to manage their relations, it's kind of like something that might be contractual, like contractual law, contractual agreement of like joint effort. And that's what many of the corporate forms are, but they also have these statutory provisions that in some cases give them practically limited liability, which is one of the key components. And if it's only based on contractual relationship, you can limit this liability against your counterparties in this kind of like a group. But then there's the third party creditor liability that you might not have the same effect as statutory law that gives limited liability. And I think that will be one way to just like draw simple conclusions, but I don't think like that will make that much sense compared to actually like trying to rethink what we have now. So trying to kind of like thinking that actually what we have here goes beyond like beyond what we are doing. Just like culture.
Totally. I mean, just talking about like leveraging the multiple governance tokens to like create this nexus of these units of work organization that are connected to each other in these really ways. Like, what's that? Like, you can't do that very easily.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, imagine this. Like, in Aave DAO, like we have quite a lot of like basically participants, and like globally, like it allows you to organize and decide on things transparently, and the result will execute. It's just like, why not? Why we can't have this kind of like governance everywhere? As a basis, like as a human right. Like there's just
totally. Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful that like, I mean, you're running a grand experiment, and it's just awesome. And like, this is in the spirit of open source. It's just like iterate, learn, improve, new proposals, new designs. and it just moves at such a powerful, fast pace. I'm really excited about, projects that are working on making creation of these types of organizations, much easier for people. Like I can imagine like the Google apps of DAOs, and like that's just like, I want to like get going with this. I know Aragon was sort of in that spirit as well, and but it feels like we're still early there. And most people aren't like, how do I start one of these? But there's a lot more people who want to start these.
A lot. And what's interesting that Aragon was, I mean, they were very early in like DAOs was one of the first use cases of like what you could build on Ethereum and the governance. And kind of like the development, there's been a lot of interesting stuff. There's the Moloch DAO. I mean, Aragon has definitely done some interesting work. Compound has doing pretty nice governance. We innovated on governance as well a bit, and I guess like there will be more models, but still, like I think this is something that requires quite a lot of more innovation. There's still like, because like one model doesn't fit for everyone, and I think as we might be able to experiment more various type of governances, that makes it very interesting, because then I see kind of like the on-chain ecosystem where we can, it's a big sandbox, so you can do a lot of things. There's also things that you can play around when you have a lot of value in big protocols, but when you are actually creating something that you are trying to test and see how it works, and DAOs is exactly where you should do. And DAOs can be, it doesn't have to govern finance only, it can govern the NFT ecosystem, gaming, and so forth. And gaming is actually a place where we should kind of like use it as a more of a sandbox and test like how the social interactions go there, and what you could actually use in finance even.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, awesome. This is just a great discussion. I'm super pleased we could do this today. Love the work that you're doing. And excited to just keep collaborating and building.
Yeah, it was very fun. Thanks for having me here, Jeremy.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. See you next time.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Bye-bye. Really enjoyable discussion there with Stani, and just continuing to explore this new substrate that is forming this new global economic system in front of us at an incredible pace. Very exciting. We'll look forward to our next episode. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and stay informed.